What's up, everyone? Jonathan Sriranganathan here. I'm coming at you from Yagara and Turrbal country in so-called Brisbane, and I'm very excited to be interviewing Asta Hill, who has just run in the Northern Territory local government elections, both as a councillor candidate for Alice Springs Town Council and for the mayoralty of Alice Springs, also known as Mparntwe. And I'm, yeah, just really psyched to be chatting to Asta because they've had amazing results down in Alice at both the territory and council levels. I think the primary vote in the Braitlin Northern Territory seat was around 38, almost 39%. And then on the back of that, this year, Asta's just had a phenomenal result in the mayoral race and has also done really well in the local councillor contest. So, yeah, Asta, did you want to introduce yourself and tell us where you're at the moment?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, my name's Asta Hill. I use she, her pronouns. I'm dialing in from Mparntwe, Alice Springs, which is central Aranda country. Should I tell you a little bit about
Yeah,
myself
so
now?
you work as a lawyer at the moment?
Yeah, I'm a criminal defense lawyer at a domestic violence legal service representing women who often get misidentified by police as perpetrators of violence.
Mm.
Um, Really important work, particularly with this tough on crime disaster in the Northern Territory. I'm also a single mum with a 5 year old and a 1 year old. And yeah, heavily involved in the Greens and my community, a community that I really deeply care about. It's my hometown, Mparntwe Alice Springs. So, other than my stint away at uni and working abroad, it's the place where I've spent most of my life, and I'm expecting my kids to spend a big chunk of their life.
Yeah, cool. And I can imagine that being a single mum, also a full-time lawyer, also running to be mayor of the town, like that is a huge workload. Has that shaped your political outlook and how have you been balancing all those different commitments?
Yeah, people often think that, or express to me that, I'm a little bit bonkers for adding another thing to the
Yeah.
mix, but it's quite the opposite. I have found that my involvement, particularly with the Greens community, but other community campaigning as well, has been so fortifying to me in my life with all of the competing demands and, with certain challenges that I've had to overcome in my life, having community around me all the time and spending time with people who have a shared vision, one that's really positive, and having my young kids around those people in that community has just been so strengthening and emboldening and has really made all of this work an absolute joy to participate in.
Yeah, cool. And I could because I you're not really living like the nuclear family suburban household vibe, and that must mean that like a lot of people are helping with like childcare and all that other stuff around the edges.
Yeah, I mean, I joke that there's like 10 people on my kids' daycare pickup list because it's just, yeah, there is a community that are raising these kids. We always have different people coming and going and staying at the house and playing different roles depending on how much I've got on. And it doesn't feel at all like my kids are lacking because of the different things I'm working on. I feel like they're just so fortunate to have all of these people showering them with love and showing and teaching them so many different things all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, I'm just really thrilled to hear that. I for people who don't know much about like the Northern Territory political landscape at the moment, do you want to give us just a quick overview of what the heck is happening in the NT? The Country Liberal Party's in power and has quite a strong majority at the territory level. Is that right?
Yeah, I think some background's really helpful. So it was pretty much a year to the day when I got this amazing mayoral result that marked a year of CLP government in the Northern Territory. That's the Country Liberal Party. They have a super majority in our parliament in the territory. They,
So they're
I
just
should
passing
also
whatever
add,
legislation they want. They can
so,
just
well, the added layer is that we have a unicameral parliament. So there's only one house,
mm.
and that means they can just steamroll any laws that they want. Many of the laws that they have passed in this year have been passed on urgency without any proper deliberation or scrutiny within Parliament. Just to give your listeners a few examples, in the space of a year, they have lowered the age of criminal responsibility from 12 to 10. They have reintroduced spit hoods being used on children. That's despite us having a royal commission, which found that these are essentially torture devices.
Mm.
Um, what else have they done? They have incarcerated an incredibly large number of people. So we now have the highest rate of incarceration in the world, second to El Salvador.
Wow, I did not
Um,
know that. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely shocking. They've closed the youth detention center in Alice Springs. So not only are they over incarcerating children, they're sending them 1,500 kilometers away from their country, their family, their supports up to Darwin. Um, they've made it extremely difficult for anyone to get bail
Mm.
because of their bail amendments. And they were actually boasting around the time of the year anniversary that one of their big achievements is that bail refusals have gone up 44%, which is just devastating for, it means that people are being refused bail because of their homelessness, for example. They've introduced pepper spray being used by civilians, terrifying.
Mm.
And this is all just in the criminal law space.
Yeah, meanwhile, they're rolling out the red carpet for mining companies and gas
Yeah,
extraction.
so they've introduced this territory coordinator position. They're basically a senior bureaucrat who can bypass legislation to fast track mining projects predominantly.
Wow.
Um, that's another example. There are so many things that they have done. Really, they scrapped our renewables energy target,
Mm.
and all of this in really quick succession. And I think already causing irreparable harms. Yeah,
Yeah,
to
like this is
terrorism.
like lasting damage. And
Yeah,
I guess that's why I'm particularly excited to see your like strong results both in the NT election in 2024 and now in the council election. It's a little glimmer of hope to see that like way over in Alice Springs, like the Greens are getting this strong result, but it more than just the Greens, it seems like there's this kind of progressive pushback against some of what's going on.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and if I could just add to that, because their big thing is like we've got this strong mandate from the 2024 election to pass whatever we need to be tough on crime. But it's like, how strong is that mandate? You look at the seat of Breitling in particular. I ran against the incumbent CLP candidate and got a 30% swing, and I only lost by 350 votes.
yeah.
And I ran a campaign on the opposite. I ran a campaign which was on like, what does community safety really mean to us? It means stopping the domestic and family violence epidemic. It means ending homelessness. It means giving children and young people more to do rather than scapegoating and criminalizing them. And, a huge proportion of the community got behind that.
Mm.
So I think that it's just disingenuous when they say that they have that mandate, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to talking a bit more about that youth safety or that community safety stuff in a moment. Do you want to just tell me like so yeah, 38.8% primary, very strong result in the seat of Breitling last year, and now this really strong mayoral result. What do you think the Greens are doing well on the ground? To what extent is this a sort of just a personal vote for you? Like you seem to know a lot of people in town and people just like you as an individual. What sort of campaigning strategies have you been using to reach people and why is there this swing to the Greens in Mparntwe?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's multi-causal for sure. And in terms of the messaging and our key initiatives in both campaigns, they have been extremely positive campaigns that we've run. So the most recent council one, our campaign was about changing the story of our town. Because we've been in the news for all of the wrong reasons. And it's had really catastrophic impacts on like our local economy, our workforce, tourism, because basically people are terrified of coming to Mparntwe Alice Springs. They think it's crime ridden and nothing else. And our campaign was about this is the best place to live. Like there's a reason why people come here and then find that they're still here 10 years later. Like it's so spectacularly beautiful. We have an excellent lifestyle here. We get to live amongst the oldest continuing living cultures in the world. And like it's just such a privilege to be on this country. So we sent a message that was genuine and heartfelt, but it was overwhelmingly positive. We could have actually devolved into some of the nastier campaign sort of strategies if we wanted to. I mean, I was running against Lisa Marie Burgoyne, who is the wife of Josh Burgoyne, the Minister for Town Planning and Environment, who incidentally I had run against in the Breitling election. And, I could have pitched the whole campaign about conflict of interest, but I didn't. We sent a message which, really carefully painted this picture of the town, and the community got behind that because we are a very proud community. And so we wanted to move away from this like fear mongering and scapegoating that the CLP and frankly the Labor Party always resort to, and instead speak about the things that we love and provide a vision that the community could get behind. So that was like the messaging, I suppose. But in terms of tactics and strategy, a huge part of it was connecting face to face with community members because, Territorians really essentially are allergic to the Greens. Until last year, we'd never had a Greens member of Parliament. So Territorians really associate the Greens with radical activism and nothing more.
Mm.
So we really needed to like very carefully gain the trust of the community. And I think that's done through meaningful conversations. We ran a door knocking campaign in the Breitling campaign, which I was so proud of. It went for like a year and a half. We literally spoke with thousands of people. We had crews of like 20 people coming out twice a week and connecting
Wow.
with the community and hearing people's concerns, validating them, supporting them, but again, offering alternatives to tough on crime. And that involved like more complicated conversations, if I'm honest, rather than like, political kind of point scoring, which usually happens.
Oh yeah,
So yeah, it was like a lot of that door knocking and community engagement. And I was really lucky that because the council campaign was about a year after the Breitling one, I was almost able to just like pick up where we left off. We got door knocking again, visiting those homes we'd already been to, and then branching out to other suburbs as well. And then we did some like really cute things as well, like sending out handwritten notes to the homes that I'd visited in the Breitling campaign to really just like bring people on board with this new part of the journey, which is local
yeah,
government.
very cool. And it seems like it worked in a big way. Like yeah, that swing is really speaks for itself. I was going to just ask you briefly about Labor. You mentioned that they've also basically capitulated to this tough on crime fear campaign, but sort of more broadly, are they a progressive force in the territory, or are they more like federal Labor, where they just sort of very much in bed with mining companies, very much a sort of centre-right party? It's kind of the same thing there. And why didn't they do any better in the local government elections?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's the same. Like they're totally in bed with mining companies, and there's this classic revolving door between like um, the ministers, their advisors, and their movement to working within mining companies or consulting companies afterwards. It's just like,
Mm,
and of course, receiving political donations from those companies. So, you know, that
yeah.
explains a lot of their conservatism. But in terms of their tough on crime approach, I think that um, the Labor government really panicked in the lead up to the most recent election, and that just caused them to go further right on crime. And they instituted a number of curfews in Alice Springs in the direct lead up to the election, and
And
I think
that
there
it
are
sounds like that kind of just legitimized the narrative that that was the big issue. It was almost like they ceded that territory and accepted the CLP's framing. And once they conceded that it was a big issue, then they're on weak ground for their own campaign.
yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I think what also happened was the community just was unable to differentiate the two parties anymore.
Mm,
You know, they'd both gone so far to the right that I think a lot of community members would have just thought, well, you know, Labor's had a multi-term government. They haven't done a great job. They're sounding a lot like the CLP. Let's just try the new option.
mm. Yeah. And I mean, what I'm struck by, and I think actually the Queensland Greens could learn a lot from the Northern Territory Greens in this respect, is that in our state election in 2024, we kind of did the opposite to what you did, which is that the Queensland Greens they were trying not to talk about youth crime. They wanted to talk about other Greens policy, strong points like housing, and would I think incorrectly, we're trying to avoid the conversation altogether so as not to give it oxygen. But the conversation already had oxygen, and the
Yeah.
LNP in Queensland were very much campaigning like
Mm,
youth crime was their single issue campaign
mm,
message. So because the Queensland Greens didn't have a clear alternative message on, then it was sort of
mm,
like we were ignoring people's concerns about that issue, pretending that it didn't exist, and then not really speaking to.
mm,
But whereas what you guys did in the NT was said, no, no, we hear you. We can see that this is a concern for you, but here's our alternative vision and our alternative
mm.
diagnosis.
It's so interesting, isn't it? And I can distinctly remember the conversations I was having with NT Greens in preparing our campaign strategy for Breitling. And many members of the party said, let's focus on our core issues.
Mm.
Let's focus on the environment, climate. Um, and a number of us really pushed back and we said, this
No,
is
we
the
have to fight
prevailing
this.
concern,
Mm.
and we are a legitimate force to be reckoned with. And we need to show leadership on this issue. And we need to offer an alternative to people. But you know where it became really tricky, and this is something I still grapple with, is meeting the community where it's at without stoking racialized crime panic.
Yeah. Tell me
It's
more about
so
that. It's
it's
really,
so difficult. I
yeah.
struggle with it on every door knock because people's experiences, they are authentically theirs, right?
Mm.
But when you live in a society where crime has become political football and where there's Facebook groups like Action for Alice, which we can talk about as well, but like this incredibly powerful Facebook group that does nothing but post crime stories in an extremely dangerous and racist and vilifying way.
Mm.
Um, but when all of these things are going on, there's that felt statistic of crime, right? Like when that's all you're hearing about all the time, it feels so close to you and it's so affecting.
Mm.
So of course we need to validate the way that people feel. And don't get me wrong, like there are a number of people who are directly victims of crime as well, who've had horrible experiences, and their experiences need to be met with empathy and care. But like meeting where that person's at, but then shifting away from racialized crime panic is so tricky because
Yeah.
you don't like it's never helpful to invalidate someone's experience. Um, but like the truth is that the situation we're in is a manufactured one.
Mm.
So for me, it's often about empathizing and connecting with that person. And only once we've connected and they're feeling safe in the conversation they're having with me, I do challenge some of these notions, and all of our volunteers do as well. And we've had to do a hell of a lot of training with each other to ensure that we strike that balance really carefully.
Yeah, I can
And we
imagine
don't
that.
always do it
I
perfectly.
can imagine that that sort of community education and supporting your own volunteers to have a good diagnosis and response to this stuff would have been really important. It's making me think about how, like, one thing that I think happened with the youth crime panic in Queensland was that this broad amorphous term of crime sort of covers everything from like maybe your car got broken into to someone got murdered. And so
Mm,
when people have an experience of fairly low level property crime, like a
Yeah.
break and enter, and maybe some possessions got stolen, but they were never in any physical danger. But then they hear on the news that someone was violently assaulted and
Hmm.
hospitalized. They connect their own experience of a very different kind of crime. And they're like, geez, that was nearly me. I was nearly killed. When they were
Hmm.
never actually in danger. But there's this sort of, by grouping all of these different kinds of offences under this broad umbrella of youth crime, it sort of fuels that moral panic where everyone feels like they're being affected by the same thing. When that fairly small group of the small number of people who've been affected by serious violent assaults get conflated with the experiences of people who've had, yeah, low level property crime and what have you.
Yeah, totally. And I've managed to have fascinating conversations with, rusted on CLP voters who have shared their experiences, and we've very gradually broken things down. For example, something that you hear all the time is um, their parents need to be accountable. And I'll respond like, so many of the young people who are being caught up in this system are in the care of the government.
Yeah,
So
they've been stolen from their parents, basically. Yeah.
the conversation you're actually wanting to happen is with the government.
Mm.
And people step back and they're like, whoa, like even that education piece is so important.
Mm.
And then also explaining to people, like, yes, there is property crime, but our detention centers, our prisons, they have a brutalizing effect on young people. So, by pushing governments to over incarcerate young people because you have this like need, this felt need for safety for you and your family, like the impact of that is that you're potentially turning younger people into violent
Mm.
offenders. Like
Hmm.
that's what's more likely to happen. And that piece again, it's really impactful in having those conversations.
And did you find the space to talk about the broader injustices of colonialism and be like, well, aren't we all on stolen land? Or there wasn't really the space to have those chats with voters?
I mean, it was very specific to the individual.
Yeah,
There are many people living in Mparntwe Alice Springs who, like, will pick an argument with me for the fact that I used the word Mparntwe.
yeah.
So, um, yeah, the colonial project and colonial violence, like, that's a much bigger conversation that's going to only be reached through really incremental conversations that are needed to get us there.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess, I mean, you've now got a bit more of a platform to maybe start some of those combos. You're looking at being on council for the next few years, I suppose. I think you and I have talked briefly about this in the past, but it's pretty common for local councils and especially mayors to express opinions about bigger picture issues that are kind of beyond the direct control of local government. And in some contexts, like mayors can even exert a lot of influence over high levels of government. But when progressive mayors or progressive councils use the platform of local government to talk about systemic change or like express views about what's going on in parliament, that they'll be attacked or for going beyond their area of responsibility and they'll be told to stick to roads, rates, and rubbish. So, like, did you have to navigate that during your campaign and going forward, do you anticipate using your platform on local government to talk about bigger picture issues, to put pressure on the federal and Northern Territory governments? What's your sort of approach to that question?
Yeah, it's interesting because our outgoing mayor, Matt Patterson, bizarrely has set a precedent. He's much more conservative,
Mm.
um, but
But he
you know,
weighed in on those bigger issues, didn't
absolutely.
he? Yeah.
So, he would often get on to Sky News and talk about the crime wave. And that prompted, Albanese flying in at no notice, an injection of federal funds, territory government imposition of curfews,
Mm.
a number of, typically conservative responses to complex social issues. But I think the point is that, yeah, he went well beyond the typical role of a man.
It's actually wild when you think about that. Like a town that has it's a pretty small population. I think you maybe had like 9,000 voters in the mayoral election who actually like this is not a big constituency yet. He was able to use that platform to have this dramatic impact on federal government politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for a start, our population is about 26,000.
Mm.
Voter turnout is another issue that we could discuss
Yeah.
because it was abysmally low. But yeah, going back to your question about sort of platforming, I suppose, even in the mayoral campaign, I was being invited onto radio to talk about issues that were, far outside roads, rates, and rubbish.
Cool.
I went on the radio and I spoke about pepper spray the week that it was being introduced. I spoke about the dangers of giving civilians a weapon like that. And it was really positive that I had that opportunity to provide an alternate perspective. So certainly, in whichever capacity, whether it's mayor or councillor, I think it's really important as a community representative um, in local government who is most connected to, like local government's obviously as grassroots as you can get within a political system. Um, so having that connection, the direct connection with the community, I think also it bestows on us a responsibility to speak out about issues that are really important and directly impacting the community. And that's particularly the case in the territory where direct representation, of Mparntwe is lacking.
Mm.
Um, it's very centralized political decision making in the territory, very Darwin focused. And
Mm.
Alice Springs is so often like a political afterthought or exploited for political gain. So I
Mm.
think as a representative here, it's really important that I'm outspoken.
So do you imagine on council even talking about stuff like um fracking and coal seam gas or about like Pine Gap, the military base? Like, are you going to be talking about Palestine or land rights? And is that's all part of your approach to local government?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are obviously limits to what can actually be done.
Yeah.
But the point of advocacy, I think it shouldn't be understated.
Mm.
Even in the height of our campaign, I attended a vigil at Pine Gap along with my running mate, and um, yeah, they delivered a speech that was picked up by the media and got an enormous amount of attention, which was, I suppose, by and large, politically quite unpopular. But we did remain outspoken fundamentally. Like the Greens have always been opposed to Pine Gap. It is a site of aggression and it is a site on stolen Aranda land, which many members of the community are not supportive of. So I think it's really important that, particularly when a genocide is being perpetrated and when there are very strong reasons to believe that the intelligence gathered from that facility is being provided to the IDF and playing a real role in that conflict. Of course, we need to talk about it,
Mm. Yeah, well
whether
said.
we can whether we can affect change or not. Of course, we need to talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess this brings us to this question of like representing the community and the community's voice and knowing what the community wants. And like frequently in so many local government elections I've been part of or been following, you hear residents complaining that the council doesn't really listen or doesn't listen to them. And then when you look into it, actually the council's doing all sorts of consultations. They're doing surveys on this or consultation about the local plan or some kind of online forum. And what really seems to be going on is that the council puts all these resources in certain kinds of tokenistic consultation, but they don't actually act on people's feedback in the way that meets people's needs. So I guess I'm interested in what you see as the difference between that kind of consultation versus actually empowering people. What is there a difference between listening to people versus grassroots participatory democracy in the sense that the Greens
Mm.
sometimes use it?
I'm so keen to talk about this, and maybe we can, through a particular local example, which
Mm.
is the Alice Springs CBD regeneration project, which is like a $20 million project to upgrade the CBD.
Mm.
And for a council with a budget of like $48 million a year, that's obviously an enormous project.
Yeah, wow.
Um, They conducted a pretty lengthy consultation, but I've received feedback from so many community members who care a lot about this project and it being done properly. Many people said it was so difficult to engage with the consultation. Like they gave they gave different versions of the plans that were proposed out for feedback, but individual matters couldn't be provided with feedback. So it was almost like it felt quite staged
Mm,
to the community. And I think that really frustrated people because it it can be hard to get people involved in consultation. And yet, even when they tried in this case, it was really impossible to meaningfully engage with. So what's the point?
mm,
And like a classic example is, a lot of people are like, oh, more shade and a basketball court in the CBD. That's great. But why does that mean we also rip up these historic red pavers that everyone loves and replace them with ugly, expensive grey pavers? It's
yeah,
like a
yeah,
small example, but it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
why can't input be provided in relation to all of these moving parts? Um, so that's, I think, an example of consultation done really badly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But going back to your question, like, surely the community can more meaningfully engage in the decisions that are being made about it. Um, we have a community that takes a lot of pride in standing up for what is important to it. Like, as an aside, what got me involved in politics in the first place was this community-based campaign we ran, which was called No New Pokies in Mparntwe,
Mm,
which was, an apolitical campaign that I think within the space of a couple of weeks, 1,000 people got on board and said, we don't want poker machines in these pubs and clubs. Like, it's so harmful to our town. People get up and speak up about what they care about, but they need the forum to do that.
mm.
And I think it's the responsibility of council to provide that. And
Yeah.
I would love to hear more from you about what that actually looks like.
Yeah, I can't wait to have more chats about that down the track. I think this it's really interesting, particularly when you've got those local councillors who can amplify the voices of the community, but then as well say, well, obviously they're not listening to us. We've all talked and we know what we want. Now, how do we actually push for it? And that moment when councillors or community representatives step over into direct action and say, well, we've done all our consultation, we've done our listening, the government's still not listening to us. Now we have to hit the streets. And I think that'll be really interesting to see, yeah, how you navigate that role of like what happens when everyone who voted for you is saying, Asta, we want this, and you don't have the power to deliver it. How do you, yeah, then turn around and say, okay, well, what other forms of action are available to us? It's going to be really, yeah, interesting to navigate over the next few years. I'm, yeah, do you feel like there are other issues that were swinging a lot of votes on the ground, or was it sort of a more holistic? It wasn't about one specific issue. It was more like, here's our broad positive vision for the town.
Yeah, changing the story was what I always went back to, and
Yeah.
which community members really did want to talk about and really resonated with them. But we had a number of other initiatives which I think the community responded really well to, noting that community safety is still the prevailing concern for
Mm,
people. We had to address that even from a local government level. So, one of our key initiatives was about giving children and young people more to do, addressing boredom. And the ideas we had were to expand access to the library and make that a more accessible and safe place for young people, because there's a really dark history of that public space being a space where young people were excluded, particularly young people sleeping rough.
mm,
So we flipped the narrative on that again, saying, that is a safe space for everyone, particularly young people, and it will have positive impacts on community safety. Another one was the town pool. We pitched that we would make the town pool essentially like free all year round for young people, and over summer where the crime waves happen, that we'd want to open it up at night as well. That was a really cool one.
yeah,
Um,
cool.
so it was nice to speak really positively about young people, engaging with them, establishing safety, bringing them into public spaces at a time when um, otherwise the narrative has been about excluding young people from public spaces, imposing curfews and things like that.
Mm.
Another one that I think the community loved, just to provide some context to your listeners, our CBD, it's literally dying. I think COVID had an impact, but also these curfews that we've just got like constant police patrols as well. Like it's a miserable place, and all you can see is like these boarded up shop fronts.
Yeah,
There's no
right.
retail or restaurants. It's certainly not the CBD that I loved growing up here.
Mm.
So, an initiative that we also pushed was about bringing the CBD back to life, partnering with favorable landlords to bring community initiatives like pop-up libraries and art galleries and things, that kind of Renew Adelaide or Newcastle
Yeah,
um,
cool.
idea, which the community loved. And again, we were able to pitch that from a positive community safety perspective, which is when you have a vibrant CBD, you have passive security, which
Yeah,
works better for community safety than curfews and police patrols.
big time.
So that was another example.
Oh
We also
man.
spoke about climate. We spoke about buffel grass, the fact that we could combat buffel on all council land. Like that would be a really important initiative as well. Yeah, a number of other things.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it's really interesting to hear that you had quite a broad, like there were some key messages and issues, but you were able to connect that to sort of the work of local council and still a few core Greens issues in the traditional sense as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's really inspiring, and I think a lot of Greens in other parts of the country should be paying a little bit more attention to what you guys have been achieving in the centre, because there's like to get the swings that you've managed to get. I don't think many other Greens campaigns are achieving that at the moment. So it'll be cool to see how things play out over the next few years and what you're able to do with the hopefully the bigger platform and the role going forward. Is there anything else you wanted to sort of put on people's radar or let people know about?
Yeah, I think that our screens have been experiencing some election fatigue, and we've had some difficult election results to work through. And I just really hope that the experience here instills some hope in people. Like the
Mm,
fact that we pulled this mayoral swing, we got this incredible result at the 1 year anniversary of the CLP wreaking absolute havoc in the
mm.
territory shows that, even when things are as frankly devastating as they are here, there is so much scope for progressive change. And I really truly believe that comes down to connecting with your community and meeting them where they're at and offering them an alternative.
Heck yeah. Great note to end on. Well said, Asta. Thank you so much for your time and thanks for your thoughts and good luck over the next few years.
Thanks so much. I've loved chatting with you.
Cheers. All right.